We're now going to start the main program with recitation of Qur'an. Let's welcome Sarah with Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم تلك آيات الكتاب الحكيم هدى ورحمة للمحسنين الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم بالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون ومن الناس من يشتري لهو الحديث ليضل عن سبيل الله بغير علم ويتخذها هزوا أولئك لهم عذاب مهين وإذا تتلى عليه آياتنا ولى مستكبرا كأن لم يسمعها كأن في أذنيه وقرا فبشره بعذاب أليم إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم جنات النعيم خالدين فيها وعد الله حقا وهو العزيز الحكيم خلق السماوات بغير عمد ترونها وألقى في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بكم وبث فيها من كل دابة وأنزلنا من السماء ماء فأنبتنا فيها من كل زوج كريم هذا خلق الله فأروني ماذا خلق الذين من دونه بل الظالمون في ضلال مبين ولقد آتينا لقمان الحكمة أن اشكر لله ومن يشكر فإنما يشكر لنفسه وما كفر فإن الله غني حميد صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Today we're very fortunate to have a panel discussion on celebrating the life of Lady Zaynab alayhi salam. Let's welcome the chair and the speakers with Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. So today we are going to be celebrating the life of Lady Zaynab alayhi salam. Lady Zaynab was a passionate, strong, resilient mother, daughter, sister and woman devoted to Allah and to fearlessly standing up for justice and against tyranny and oppression, who denounced the atrocities committed against the family of the Prophet in Yazid's court. We often hear about the biggest sacrifice that Imam Hussein made for upholding the dignity of Islam, but we sometimes forget that his message would have been lost if it hadn't been for his sister and his son who had spread it far and wide. And it's through Bibi Zaynab's extraordinary handling of that hardship that we get to glimpse the depths of her courage and her patience. We're very blessed to be joined by these two amazing women to discuss this further, Zahra Al Alawi and Kawther Abbas. Zahra has graduated from a media and television degree at the University of Hertfordshire in England, as well as being personally tutored by Islamic scholars and lecturers. She's been presenting and delivering Islamic lectures globally for over 17 years. Her TV talk show, Women's View, on Sky, broadcasted over 1,000 episodes interviewing a range of women. She has gone on to host several other female-led television shows and has appeared on British media channels such as the BBC and Channel 4, speaking on Islamic issues. And Kawther Abbas is a GP by profession, and she also studies Hawza part-time at the Al-Mahdi Institute. She's been teaching Qur'an and doing Islamic talks for around 20 years, and is the co-founder of the Muslims Families Initiative, which runs programs targeted at children and their families. So can we welcome them with a loud salawat?
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Can we have a second loud salawat for the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen? And to hasten the reappearance of our Imam al-Mahdi Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajah. Can we have a third loud salawat? My dear brothers, sisters, respected elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today's topic, I've been given 15 or 20 minutes to speak about today's topic. My topic today is about the wisdom of patience through the lens of Lady Zaynab alayhi salam. We could all agree that patience is something that we all need. Without a doubt, throughout our lifetime, we will all go through situations, we will all go through different circumstances where we will need to practice patience. Lady Zaynab alayhi salam, without a doubt, her life was overshadowed with misfortunes, with tribulations, and if it was any woman in history, any individual in history who had the most misfortunes placed upon her is Lady Zaynab alayhi salam. In fact, Lady Zaynab alayhi salam is known as al-Masa'ib, the mother of misfortune. Since she was a young age, she lost her father, her mother. She saw the injustice that was brought against them. She lost her father, her brother, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And sometimes I believe we don't really truly understand the circumstances that Lady Zaynab alayhi salam went through before Karbala and after Karbala. During the Battle of Karbala, it's quite interesting when Imam Zayn al-Abidin, when he was asked after the Battle of Karbala, what was the worst thing that you saw in the Battle of Karbala? What was the worst thing you saw? Was it Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam being killed? Was it when Ali al-Asghar was killed? What was the worst thing you saw? Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam replied, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. Because what he saw that Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam, what Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam had to go through, the torture, the physical violence that was taken against her, the mental violence that was taken against her, it was truly brutal. So it really does show us that she went through great misfortune, she went through great tribulations, and the patience that she showed is absolutely marvelous. And you see that even Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam, although she went through extreme violence, although physically, when you look at her, you think, you know, what happened to her? She was unrecognizable after the Battle of Karbala, but her courage, her patience, her bravery, you know, when she came into the palace of Yazid, people thought, oh my God, that is Imam Ali. They thought when she spoke with eloquence and courage, they said it is as if Imam Ali is speaking in front of us. So you can see, although they could have, they done great injustice to her physically, her strength, her spirituality, her inner strength was not, they could not take that. So today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about the wisdom of patience, because this is a quality that we should all have. It is a quality, you could say, that is quite difficult to achieve in a world of impatience, you know. And before I begin and talk about the patience of Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam, I want to highlight the different types of patience. There are different types of patience. Number one is the patience in everyday life. You know, you're in the streets, you're in a traffic jam, you need, and you go through kind of a temporary difficulty, you need patience. And in this day and age where the world is constant, fast-paced and impatient, we need that type of patience. That's the first patience. There's another type of patience, which is the patience of refraining from sin. So when we say we submit to Islam, if you are faced with a sin, we need patience to overcome that. For example, if someone's in front of you and they said something, you could swear back at them, you can do a sin or do injustice to them, but we need a type of patience to prevent ourselves from committing that sin or committing that injustice. And the third type of patience is patience through hardship, patience through difficulty, and that is perhaps a very, very difficult type of patience to develop. So today, inshallah, we are going to be talking about patience through hardship. And patience is part of religion. It is an attribute of a mu'min. It is an attribute that we must all have. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam said that patience to faith is like the head to the body. Without the head, the body perishes. Without patience, faith perishes. So we see that there is great significance put on the aspect of patience when you are a believer, when we submit and we are a believer. Even the Qur'an constantly tells us, be patient on what befalls on you. Be patient. Allah is with the patient ones. And we see this echoed constantly in the Holy Qur'an about the patient ones, about telling us that be patient, even if hardship falls upon you, even if you go through a circumstance, a very difficult situation, be patient. So, inshallah, today we are going to be talking about patience through hardship, because I believe that every single one of us, whether you are high class, whether you are low class, whether you are from which culture or nationality, we are all going to face hardship in our life. This is something which we will never be able to escape. This is life. We are going to be in situations which we will say, why me? Why has this happened to me? Why? You know, we may have injustice from individuals, you know, taken against us, and we're thinking, how can we be patient? So when we look at Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam, we learn how we can be patient in times of difficulty. So number one is praise Allah. And you're probably thinking, what do you mean praise Allah? Because it's very, very easy to praise Allah when something good happens to us. When we get a good job, when we have a child, when something good happens to us, it's very easy to praise Allah. Oh, thank you, Allah, for this job. Thank you for this what you have given me. But it's very difficult to praise Allah in difficulty. When it's something doesn't go our way, are we able to praise Allah? And this is a quality that Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam had. When she delivered those speeches after Karbala, she always began by praising Allah. She said, thank you, you know, all praise to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, and praise the Lord of, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this same thing was echoed in her mother's speech, in the speech of Fadak. When she began that speech, she said, Alhamdulillahi ala ma an'am wa lahu shukru ala ma alham. She began her speech, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, by thanking Allah. Now you would think that if someone has gone through difficulty, if Fatima Zahra alayhi salam had traveled to the mosque to gain back her rights, why would she begin by praising Allah? If Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam had seen what she saw in Karbala, when she has been physically attacked, when she has been verbally attacked, why would she praise Allah? And you see that we have to have that trust in Allah. We have to praise Allah in goodness and in difficulty. And you see this also in the Holy Qur'an with the story of Prophet Ayyub. Now, Prophet Ayyub had everything. He had everything, from wealth, from children, everything, and everything was taken away from him, and he still thanked Allah. He said, praise, in the Quran, he thanks Allah and he says, thank you, God, for bestowing upon me wealth and children, and thank you for taking it away from me, because you have removed that barrier and allowed me to get closer to you. So I think this is a wisdom, this is a higher level of patience where we are able to praise Allah in difficulty. So we always pray, we say, Ya Allah, please do not test me with something that will shake my faith, because we are all going to be tested, whether we like it or not. We're all going to be tested. But, Ya Allah, do not test me with something which will shake my faith. You know, at the end of this test, allow me to still praise you, to still be faithful to you, to still want to submit to you. That's number one. Number two is seeing the good in the situation. Now, this, even non-Muslims, they always say this: see the silver lining, see the good in the situation. And this is something that Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam also taught us, that even after the Battle of Karbala, Ubaidillah bin Ziyad said to her, you know, what do you think of what Allah has done to your brother Imam al-Hussein? You know, what do you think of what happened? She said, I saw nothing but beauty. Because she recognizes that this beauty, whatever happens, is Allah's wisdom behind it. There is beauty in everything that happens. So always, you know, having that tawakkul in Allah, having that belief in Allah, it's a greater level of patience, it's a greater level of wisdom when you're able to see the goodness. You know, when we board a plane, when we board the ship, we don't start to question the pilot or the person, or you know, the person that's sailing the ship. We have trust, and the same thing should be applied to our life. We should have trust. Sometimes we want our life to go a certain way, but we should have that trust in Allah that He knows how He is going to pan our life out. We would like it to go ABC, it may go ADD, but we have that trust in Allah, that tawakkul, that knowledge that at the end, we will get to our destination. Allah will get us to the destination that we are supposed to go in. So seeing the good in the situation and having that tawakkul, having that acceptance, having that knowledge that Allah does truly know best. He knows our life. He knows what's best for us, even if we do not know what's best for ourselves. And the last thing is understanding that justice is greater than this world. Sometimes in our perspective, we see only this world. We think that if someone does injustice towards us, we need to do injustice towards them. And the same equation applies to people that have an argument that say that, why are people born disabled? Why are people, that's not just. Because in our perspective, justice is not only this world. Justice goes beyond this world. So having that understanding that whatever happens, that Allah will deal with it. And even Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam, when she spoke as if it's not only this world, that you may have defeated us physically in this battle, but we are the winners, we are the victorious ones, socially and spiritually, and in the hindsight, we are the victorious ones. And she even says, for wallahi lan tamhu dhikrana, you will never erase our memory. You try to physically erase our memory by killing us, but you will never erase our memory. And we see that today, where her name is echoed. We are holding a program in her name is echoed. So we always have to have that understanding that on the Day of Judgment, people are going to be accountable for their actions. If justice doesn't take place in this world, it will take place in the hereafter. There is a continuation. It doesn't end here. So having that in our mindset, that even if someone does something injustice towards us, or you know, misfortune comes towards us, we have faith that, you know, justice will be the end, whether it's here, whether it's in the hereafter. So having that, and I think these are the valuable lessons that we learned from Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam. I don't know if I've gone over time, under time, but I just want to end with a quick story, because I believe that Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam, she is a lesson for all of us. And in this day and age where women are the target of everything, you know, hijab, the way they dress, the Me Too campaign, people being physically attacked, being verbally attacked, having their hijabs taken off, Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam is a lesson for us, because even if we are attacked physically, even if we are attacked verbally, there is this courage inside us that Sayyidah Zaynab does give us courage. And we see that although that she was chained, she had hot water thrown upon her, when she spoke, she still spoke with eloquence, because they can shake you physically, they can shake you, but they cannot shake our core. And I want everyone to take that strength from Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam when they go forward. And just to end off with the last story that really shows us the sadness that was brought upon Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam, is when she was in the palace of Yazid, and when Hind came. And this is truly sad, because Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam, even when she went back to Medina, she was unrecognizable. And we see that when Hind came, she said, you know, she told Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam, Sayyidah Zaynab said, we are from Medina. She said, well, there was a family that I used to know in Medina. And she goes, And Sayyidina Zainab alayhi salam said, so which family is? She said it to clarify it to everyone. And she said, it's the house of Ali. And the Sayyidina Zainab alayhi salam said that if you are talking about the house of Ali, then Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, this is his head, which is mounted on the spear. As for Abbas and the sons of Ali, they are in the land of Karbala, martyred and beheaded. If you are talking about Zayn al-Abidin, then this is Zayn al-Abidin who is ill and unable to stand. And if you are talking about Zaynab, then I am Zaynab. And Hind, at that point, she fainted because she was absolutely astonished that this is Zaynab, because she was unrecognizable. So this is the misfortune that was put on Sayyid Zaynab and the patience that she showed. So inshallah, this can be a lesson to every single individual that has gone through difficulty or will go through difficulty, that patience of Sayyid Zaynab, let's learn from the patience of Sayyid Zaynab alayhi salam. Wa sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وصلوات الله وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So first of all, thank you to Zahra for her eloquent, beautiful speech as always. Thank you to the organisers for allowing us the platform to speak in front of you. Thank you for those of you listening. I apologise if my voice starts trailing off or I start having a coughing fit. I'm just overcoming a very non-COVID virus that's just lingering. So apologies in advance. If we wanted to learn lessons from Sayyida Zainab and know how to walk in her footsteps, the best way to do so is to look at her words. And we don't have much of her words from her early formative years, but we obviously do have what is reported as her speeches in the court of Ibn Ziyad and the court of Yazid. And there are two aspects of her words that I wanted to concentrate on today, with a view to looking at how we are doing as a society, especially with respect to our women, and what we can learn from her life and her words. So her speeches, there's two aspects, there's so many different aspects one can talk about, but there's two aspects I wanted to concentrate on. The first was her knowledge. So if you read her speech from beginning to end or listen to it, it is replete with, it's hugely stacked with Quranic ayat, with references to many facets of Islamic knowledge. And this is not surprising because she was, during her time in Medina, known as Al-Alima Ghayr Mu'allima. She was the knowledgeable one without a teacher. She lived in the vicinity, obviously, of Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, Hussein, and a huge amount of wealth of knowledge. And she was always very keen to learn, to pick up what she could at every stage in her life. She was known to teach. She was known to very regularly hold sessions. We don't know if they were exclusively for women, but there were references even at that time to certain people, even men, being told to ask Zainab about specific things. And so it was no surprise really when she made that speech that the knowledge came pouring in. When me and Zahra, we want to prepare a lecture, or any lecturer does, it requires a little bit of, note-taking, a bit of research. I mean, it takes me days and days to prepare a lecture. She was put on the spot. Not only put on the spot, but she'd gone through horrendous time, as Zahra very eloquently said. And she, off the cuff, managed to produce something so eloquent, so beautiful, and so profound in terms of its knowledge that actually it changed the shape of history. Because without that, it would have been another. The narrative of the time was that this is a rebellious group of people that stood up against the Khalif of the time. This was the narrative. This was the common narrative, and she changed that. She changed hearts. And the second aspect, obviously, was her ability to do that, her oratory skills, her balagha, her ability to eloquently put this across. And that, in a way, was her power, because she spoke not long after Imam Zayn al-Abidin in the court of Yazid. So there was already an imam that had spoken. She didn't need to speak. She was in a court full of men in a time when women didn't speak out loudly. You know, we take it for granted now. We underestimate the magnitude of what she did. But she didn't only do that. She managed to bring together all the emotion that she felt during the horrible things that she witnessed and brought it out in a positive way, in an audacious way, to challenge the leader of the time, the Pharaoh of the time, someone that you wouldn't dare speak up to in that way. And she was a woman in a society where women are not valued. So it cannot be overstated, the magnitude of what she did. Now let's fast forward to today, many hundreds of years later. And what we find is actually, in terms of Muslim women in the West and what we have done and what we have achieved, I think it's amazing. There isn't a day or there isn't like a month that goes by where you don't hear of some new Muslim woman in as a supreme judge, or as the top lawyer, or as a business owner who has excelled and won awards, or as an MP or a congresswoman. We are making inroads in every facet of society, but we are so behind when it comes to Islamic scholarship. There is a huge gap between our male counterparts and women when it comes to the two aspects, knowledge and speaking. So let's try to sort of explore a little bit about what, so first of all, I guess the question might be, what's the difference? If I'm doing a speech right now, or my male counterpart is giving the same words, what's the difference? If I am studying an Islamic law and deriving using all of the tools given to me in usul al-fiqh to try to look at this hadith and interpret it, what is the difference between me and a man? Well, it's obvious I'm a different person. From male to male, you see things through a different lens. For every experience where you've grown up, you see everything through a different lens. Even the Qur'an, you read it through a different lens. If there isn't the women's view and the woman's lens on the table, then we are missing a huge, massive chunk of society. Like the amount of women that come to me and say to me, I've tried to ask this question about something like istihada. Honestly, that's an extreme example that only maybe a woman could ever understand. But there's so many examples where we are not represented, in our houses, from our houses down. And I think that's a huge shortcoming on the part of all of us, men, women, and the whole of society. The other aspect that we said that Sayyidah Zaynab brought to the table was the power of emotion, the power of understanding her emotion, of expressing her emotion, the way a woman speaks and the way a woman articulates, or the way it's just different. So why not enrich ourselves by hearing both? Why not have both in the arena? Okay, so that's one aspect. Knowledge also is incumbent upon all of us. In the Qur'an it says, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. It's not a male thing. It's, we know that. We know that. But the problem is that even if you don't want to become a speaker or a scholar, you don't want to go to that level, even from the level of the fact that most of us are going to be mothers, or at least, some way raising a new generation, they say, madrasa, we need to be at least a standpoint where we've gone beyond the madrasa teachings that we get until how old do people finish madrasa? I don't know, 15, 16. We take them out of Arabic school when they're around, when they finish their GCSEs. And that's it. That's the only Islamic knowledge that a lot of men and women have. I'm not saying it's just a female issue here, but the female being often the main caregiver, the person who spends the most time with children in a very rapidly evolving society where children are questioning more than ever, where teenagers are not content with you just have to do this because it says so. You need to have the knowledge and the know-how to be able to answer back. So even if you're not wanting to get to that level of knowledge, you need to have a bit of a background as to why you're doing what you're doing. You need to know why you're doing, and if you don't agree with something, you need to be able to look it up, to be able to challenge it in the way that is, you need to be able to speak the language, so to say. When women say this is not fair, this ruling is not fair, that ruling is not fair, nobody pays attention because we're seen as being emotional, we're not understanding the logic behind it. We have to be able to speak the language of the scholars to be able to challenge these things, and that means that knowledge-wise we need to increase. The other aspect is the speaking aspect. So you can disseminate knowledge in any way, and knowledge is useful when it's taught. So there are lots of women doing madrasa, being madrasa teachers, which is amazing, which is really good. Actually, you know, we run MFI, the majority of the women that teach the majority of people that teach and run programs are women. So in this sphere, we're doing really well. The children's programs, I don't know if men are involved, but fantastic. By the way, I'm speaking to the converted here because Mahfal Ali is obviously an outlier by huge margin to the rest of the, you know, Shia centers in this country and all over the world, really, in terms of female participation. So we're doing really well in certain aspects, but when it comes to being on the front, you know, in front of men and women, we are still very, very behind. Now, again, you say, well, what's the point? The point is that these days, women are everywhere. Like I said, they are lecturing, they are, you know, speaking in every single other place. But if they are absent from our mosques no longer become relevant. There's a huge detach between our mosques and young girls because they're not seeing the representation of their gender on the pulpit, in the speaking world. They're not seeing it, and it just does not feel as relevant to them. The insights that I can give about hijab, about whatever aspect of my, you know, I can only do that because I'm practicing it, and as much as, you know, our male counterparts can give their theoretical background about it, they won't be able to do it in the same way. So it's not just enough that we have a cohort, and we do have a good amount of scholars coming through, but they're still absent. They're not on the front stage. They're not speaking. I don't know how hard it was to find female speakers today. I heard it wasn't easy. There isn't many. You know, in Muharram, Safar, I saw a huge demand for Islamic knowledge from female-only gatherings. I did a lot of lectures in majalis. The people are hungry for it, but there's such a lack. Do you know who would do it? So again, in terms of knowledge, if we're going to learn from Lady Zaynab in terms of knowledge, in terms of our speaking, we are really way behind. So let's just get practical and just end it, because I've probably spoken way, way too long. What can we do going forward? So first of all, knowledge is much easier now than it ever was. At the time of my mum, who grew up in Iraq, in Saddam's era, when they wanted to learn, they had to hide their books, because any time Saddam's men may come around, and that's it. You know, it's death sentence for you if you were religiously inclined. They used to have their jalsat in secret, you know. But they took this spirit and they took it on with them. Now we have our knowledge at the tip of our fingers, okay? We have access to everything, translated, non-translated. You can't even use the excuse that you don't know Arabic anymore. But for some reason, we're not encouraging ourselves or prioritizing this in our lives. So on an individual level, we need to prioritize it. Because on whatever level you have some belief, you need to be understanding why you believe in those things, and you need to be strengthening your belief, even if it's not going out there on the arena to do it. It's just for yourself and for your family, your surroundings, and your kids. So that's number one. On an individual level, we need to be prioritizing seeking knowledge. Number two is on a more societal, cultural level, we need to have a think about the barriers that are continuing to stop females from thinking that they can speak, or feeling that they can, you know. There's a huge difference, I find, in confidence, maybe. I don't know about males and females. I find, like, having a daughter and a son, there's a point when, like, they get this such huge perfection tendencies that, like, no, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. Even if their knowledge is huge, they're not good enough. That's one thing. The other cultural barrier is still this feeling, I think, that actually a woman shouldn't be on the front, you know, shouldn't be on the minbar. Like in a Muharram majlis full of men and women, there's still a discomfort about the fact that a woman would sit in front of men and give a lecture. And we have to go back to Lady Zaynab and think about, like I said, the fact that she didn't have to do it, and what's the value in doing it. And if she is maintaining a hijab, what could possibly be the excuse for her not speaking and not being out there in society? Otherwise, what's the point of hijab, you know? So on a cultural, on a systemic level, we need to be obviously the big elephant in the room is the fact that women are the main caregivers. They have the children. They spend their years looking after the children. So this is what a lot of women say: I don't have time. I don't have the energy. I can't advance myself in this way. I feel it, to be honest, as well. Like, if I wanted to be more prominent as an Islamic speaker, there's always a little bit of a difficulty in doing that because balancing everything is so difficult. But that's when the role of the supportive husband comes in. That's where the role of the whole community as a whole, you know, making knowledge and up to even the Hawza levels accessible for women with children, so they don't feel they have to choose. Lady Zaynab looked after her children and raised them beautifully, but was able to teach at the same time. You can do both. Of course you can. We've got women doing everything now. You know, obviously I never advocate anything getting in the way of your role as a mother. I think, honestly, that's the biggest role you have as women if you are mothers. However, I would say that there's just no... we often excuse ourselves in that way, but we can find ways as a community, as a society, to encourage more scholarship, more female input, even if we do have children. And because I've spoken far too long, the last thing I'll say is this. At the end of the day, why are we seeking knowledge? Why are we speaking? Why are we doing all of this? We're not doing it for any other reason but closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're all on this journey trying to find it together. The thing that really ultimately carried Lady Zaynab on that speech was Allah. The thing that carries all of us, me and Zahra and anyone that comes to give you a speech, you know, beforehand, we're like a bit nervous maybe, we're thinking what we're going to say. Somehow Allah carries us through. And this is the power of knowledge. This is the power of knowing more, of delving more. Even when it comes to the Qur'an, is getting the closeness to Allah needed, and Allah then will carry you the rest of the way. So I hope I've made a good case for the fact that we need to be learning from Lady Zaynab in terms of our knowledge for men and women, because she's a role model for all, but also just have more female representation in the public sphere, in the speaking sphere, in all scholarship spheres. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد.
Thank you so much for such insightful talks. And in answer to your question, yes, one of the reasons why we don't have a third speaker is because it was so difficult to find another female speaker, which is, you know, really sad and it's such a big issue. So thank you for highlighting that. So I guess I'm going to open it up to questions. Does anyone have any?
Oh my God. So I just wanted to ask, the lack of such a role, as you mentioned, do you think it has some impact on the lack of confidence in our girls? Okay, that's fine. So do you think it has some influence or some part to cause a lack of confidence in our girls when they are challenged for hijab, for example? Because if they look at their mothers, for example, and they look at the whole society led by men, so when they being challenged and they are told, oh yeah, the hijab is forced upon you, so we want to save you, kind of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. If you know, we just underestimate, even from my generation, how different.
And it's getting worse.
The new generations are, and it's not necessarily worse or better. It's different.
Yes.
Their view on women's place in society is hugely changing all the time. You know, my daughter goes to an Islamic school, but all of her class call themselves feminists and will shoot someone down if they are not calling themselves feminists. Their ideas and their thoughts are changing. And instead of sort of saying, oh, this is a huge problem, how are we going to protect them? How are we going to shield them? We need to confront it head on and say, how are we going to adapt? How are we going to change our view? And you can only do that if you have a woman in that role, because, like I said, that religion becomes irrelevant if it is seen only through one lens and through an old lens or through a male lens. It becomes irrelevant for a huge subsection of our society, which are girls. Does it increase confidence? I think there's many reasons why girls' confidence is lacking. We work a little bit with teenage girls. We have clubs, and you see the change. You know, you see them when they're young and they're confident and they're outspoken and they go and they're full of life, and then something year 5, year 6, something changes. The self-consciousness kicks in. This is a psychological thing that I think men and women go through, but women go through it earlier and in different ways, and they adapt in different ways. And there's a lot more perfectionist tendencies in women, lot more sort of not wanting to display your vulnerabilities, and not helped, like obviously by the social media world that we live in. I mean, and social media is another big aspect as well, because we're living in a very different world. People don't come to these talks in their in their huge masses. People don't, go to small jalasat that the women have, that the ulama, the female speakers might have their small little gatherings. That's not where the women are. The women are on social media. They're on YouTube. They're on TikTok. They're on whatever. They're looking for female representation there. And if they don't see it, I think that it can just make religion a little bit more irrelevant, and 100% affects their confidence in their religion being a part of their answer to their everyday life.
Ahsantum.
I don't know if you want to add anything.
Once again, the social media, I think this is why we always advocate that we need to have individuals that look like the young girls, because now our youngsters are on social media 24/7, and unless they see, I mean, as a human instinct, we do imitate the images that we see constantly, because it's, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, it does drum into our heads. And I've worked with a lot of girls as well in different camps, in different groups, and they are being influenced by the images they see on social media, which is why we need more of our community's representation, women from our community going out, because our girls will imitate the images they see. I mean, even hijab trends, like the turban hijab and different trends, it's because of social media. There's been studies that said that it's because of social media. So we do need more representation from our community being out there, and I think social media and the influence of social media will only get greater. It's not going to get less. The more that technology advances, the more that we advance, it will get more, it will influence our young girls even more. So the fact that we do need our representation, the community's representation out there, so our daughters have something to look up to.
Just one more aspect. I think we have to not also confuse quietness, which a lot of girls generally tend to have quiet voices. I'm one of them. Or maybe shyness. I grew up very shy with a lack of confidence. There's the huge spectrum of how a woman can be. I think when you only have a certain type of speaker speaking in a certain type of way, in a certain tone, and they're all male, that's the only thing you ever see. Therefore, you never think that you are ever going to be capable of doing that. And I think being able to say that you can be quiet and you can be a little bit shy and you can be introverted, but equally you can be, out there on the stage showing yourself in all aspects. I think that just means that you just feel like, I am represented, no matter my personality.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for 2 great insights, really, into a beautiful lady. My question relates to the Holy Prophet and Bibi Khadija and Bibi Fatima and Bibi Zaynab. They're jewels for us. They're honestly great examples of, women having these rights in a society that didn't have them, to be honest, at the time. I mean, girls were being buried alive. I mean, the idea of that just scares me, really. But we have some great examples in the foundation of Islam. Even in history, women founded, the first university that was kind of very influential was founded by a woman. Where did we go wrong? Where did we lose that? And kind of, are there some things that we can look at in that time where already women's, stature wasn't there and the Holy Prophet overcame those problems? Are there examples for us there as to how we can, overcome the problems today that we're having that are very similar?
I don't know. So I would say, first of all, I think you made a very valid point that in the beginning of Islam, in early Islam, you see a strong presence of women. There are strong female personalities. I remember my father, God bless his soul, he had a whole book which talked about hundreds of women in early Islam that really built the foundation of Islam. And you see that, and then we come to this day and age and we think, like you said, where did we go wrong? Did we revert back and remove the rights that was granted by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And I think it's important to really pinpoint that Islam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought Islam, but Islam then kind of went to different countries, the more it expanded, the more that culture was injected into the religion. Now, so some cultural practices, it doesn't mean it's against Islam, it's un-Islamic, but I think many of the obstacles that many women have come to when it comes to public speaking, when it comes to propagating the religion, females propagating the religion, is cultural. So I remember back then when I used to present a weekly show, so we needed hundreds of women. I don't know how we found it, but sometimes we would approach women and their husbands or their fathers will say it's aib. So it's not haram, but culturally it's not acceptable. So I think that where we have gone wrong is sometimes we put culture before religion. So culturally, you know, having a woman out there, having a woman being seen, it's culturally, you know, unacceptable. You know, men are looking at you. But, you know, I remember, because I come from a very conservative family, very conservative, whereby my mum didn't even show her face for all her life, you know, until she really got bad eyesight and she came to London. The doctor advised that she removes the face veil. So I come from a family that do not even show their face in public. So when I wanted to to give public speeches, my dad encouraged me, but we went to the Maraja and they said she's allowed to show what is allowed for her in Islam, which is her hands and her face. And the voice is not part of the arwa. You can voice your voice in public. So that is not part of this. It's not un-Islamic to have your voice out there. So I think, you know, but culturally, I mean, but my uncles were like, but her voice, people are going to hear her voice. But it's like, but the voice is not haram. So I think, you know, where we've gone wrong is that we've put culture before religion. And that has prevented a lot of women from going forward. And I think, unfortunately, this has enabled the West to find faults in Islam. So every time the West, and we've been on Western media, and the first aspect that they want to attack Islam is through the aspect of women. It oppresses women. The hijab oppresses women. You know, even I remember I went on Channel 4 once and I had a little segment. It was a 5-minute segment on hijab, but the comments, they had uploaded it on their website. The comments: get out of our country, hijab, hijab, hijab. Islam oppresses women. So we have to recognize that they are finding faults through the aspects of women, but Islam, that's why the confusion comes in. How does Islam grant women rights when we see this? So in Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive, women. So we have to then recognize what are the rights that Islam has brought to us and what is culture. We need to make a clear distinction between the two, and then I think that will enable us. And in fact, you know, they say that when Imam Mahdi, may Allah hasten his appearance, when he comes out, that Islam will be unrecognizable. It will not be exactly the religion that the Prophet brought because of all these cultural aspects that's been injected, the changes that have happened. So we have to recognize that before, pre-Islam, women were oppressed. Pre-Islam, women were seen as lower than men. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came to give rights to women. The fact that in some areas, you know, this has the rights have been removed from women is not the foundation. It's not the true Islam. Islam, in fact, liberates women. It gives them the rights, and that's where the confusion comes in. But I think, number one, we need to really have studies about the influence of female figures in early Islam. I think that is so important, and we still haven't seen that. Where who are the women that built Islam? You know, we know it's Khadija, and we know it's this, and we know Khadija, without her wealth, Islam would have never flourished. But beyond Khadija and the women of the Ahlul Bayt, no one knows anymore. You know, the first martyr, they probably know the first martyr was a woman. But beyond that, no one really knows. So I think we really do need to go down to the basics.
Just really quickly following up on that, I completely agree. And I would expand further and say these women were empowered by the Qur'an, because the Qur'an made a point to make sure that it was al-mu'minun wal-mu'minat, that there was no distinction in the essence of a female and a male except through taqwa. And they were empowered by that. But with time, like Zahra says, I feel like now the Islam we are currently practicing on a wide level is unrecognizable from the early Islam, and some of that is cultural, and some of that is the cultural infiltration into even our ahadith, where you have thousands of ahadith that talk about women being naqisat al-uqul, deficient in the aql, or they are the most people in hellfire and things like that. Now we can dismiss them and say these are not sahih and these are whatever, but the problem is that sometimes our sometimes our viewpoint of certain things are influenced by this sort of general trajectory that the hadith took. I think the problem is not just a women problem, it's a systemic problem Islamically worldwide. We've lost the ability to be thinking innovatively, sort of changing with the times in a way that still keeps our Islamic values, our morals, our principles, but recognizing that we live in a completely different era. Our institutions, our usul al-fiqh are set up in that way to be fluid, to be moving, to be evolving in a way that's still within the framework of Islam, but we have just become stagnant generally, and that goes above board and in every aspect, from theology to philosophy to everything. So, of course, women as well have been left behind in that aspect, I think.
I just wanted to, so there's one observation I made, which is you mentioned cultural barriers, and similar to what you just said now. I think cultural barriers within Islam, I think, do sometimes get driven by fiqh and official Islamic rules. So I think one concrete action we can take is, before trying to address the cultural barriers, we need to find out where these cultural barriers have come from. And I think, without trying to be controversial, I think a lot of fiqh rules are inherently patriarchal and misogynistic. For example, I don't even know if these are official rules, but these are just things I can think of at the top of my head. Women can't lead salah, women can't witness marriages, women can't be a mujtahid or a marja'. I don't think technically a woman can be a marja', etc. I'm sure there's many more examples people can think of. So I think as long as you've got those rules set in stone that are inherently stopping women from taking a sort of like a more visible line and being there on the front lines, giving talks and leading majalis, etc. I think we really need to sort of address these fiqh rules. And like you said they're fluid. I think some action needs to be taken to actually change those rules, because I don't see why why any of these rules exist. And the Qur'an clearly, I mean, there's a few examples where it says, two women equal one male when it comes to witnessing, for example. But if we put that to the side, I don't think there's any sort of origin for women not being able to lead the salah, for example. I can't see where that came from.
No, I agree. I agree, like I said, with the stagnation of our ability to interpret the fiqh. And there are a few scholars, big scholars, that have tried to sort of change things and change the status quo based on their knowledge and based on the books and the rulings. So no, they're not going up and just saying, I don't like this, I'm going to just throw it out, But these people, unfortunately, with time, they become a bit silenced. They are the minority, and that's in general in our religious thought. So I agree with you that if you look at the foundations of how our school of thought came about, there was definitely room and scope for ijtihad and room and scope for growth and change with times. There is even, there is some, that advocate contextualization of even some Quranic verses that may, but whether you agree and how controversial this is, the fact is you need women on the table discussing these things with the men. You need them to be knowledgeable enough to be able to have their voices heard in amongst, the male scholars who are looking over this. So, people might agree or disagree with certain, say, no, this is set in stone, but we shouldn't conflate our current fiqh with the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the fiqh is our interpretation of Allah's sharia, and it's not going to be 100%. We are guided by the scholars we have, but it would be amazing and wonderful to have a greater variety of these scholars, to be able to, put in more views, a more diverse view on these issues. 100%.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, just to add on to that, I do agree, I think a lot of people have voiced the same concerns as you did as well, and I can think of, there's been many discussions and many arguments regarding many of the aspects that you've mentioned. From the top of my head, I remember one or two high-ranking scholars that, in fact, said that why can't a woman become a marja if she has reached that level of ijtihad? Why cannot she be a marja? So I think this is a huge discussion that obviously the high-ranking scholars in the marja need to really sit down and discuss. But what I specifically have an issue with is the cultural aspects which we dismiss in everyday life, like when sisters go to university or sisters in the workplace. Some cultural barriers are not applicable in certain areas, but when it comes to our religious gatherings or our mosque, then those cultural barriers are presented, and suddenly women cannot present. But the same lady can be at university and she will be applauded for giving a speech in front of, let's say, a hall at university, but when it comes to our religious mosques. So I think what, my specific problem with cultural barriers is when it's applicable to our mosque and certain settings, but not applicable for other places. So I think if we applaud and celebrate women in the workplace, the same thing should happen to women that want to propagate the religion. In fact, they should be encouraged to propagate the religion as well.
Okay, so just one thing, we've got about 6 people who've put their hands up. Next door, the children are getting a bit tired, and so if parents can pick up their children as they can, as much as possible, whilst we continue for a little bit, that would be great. We have 6 questions, so if we are able to do a few together, I think that might be slightly preferable. We may get slightly fewer because some people are going next door. So we've got about 6 questions. Okay, let's start there.
Okay. As a parent to girls, what would be your advice or any practical ways for this generation of girls to get them to be, more confident and better at public speaking and things like that?
Yeah, they can ask.
Okay.
I'll write them down if you want.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to try and bring this back to Bibi Zainab and the actual discussion that was planned for today. Firstly, it's a comment. The event of the khutbah in Yazid's Darbar is so relevant because it was a one-off and they had come through such struggles to reach that point. And it was also an exception that we're never going to see, inshallah, of course. And that's why it's so relevant. And that's why, because it was such an exception, both taking into account the cultural aspects of the times and also the passion of what they had personally been through, and obviously the eloquence, and more importantly, I feel that it's coming from the heart, it's on the spot, there's the passion involved there as well. That's why we remember it so much. However, I've got a question now, and maybe I'm totally wrong about this. Bibi Zainab herself on Sham-e Ghariba, even though she knew that the tents were being lit on fire, from my understanding and from the majalis that I've listened to, she still asked Imam Zain al Abidin for permission to leave the tents, even though she knew what the ruling would be. And the other question that I have, maybe I'm wrong in this as well, is that during the life of Imam Ali, in normal circumstances, in a time that was not in war, and Imam Ali being the leader and the Khalif as well of the time, Bibi Zainab gave khutbah or lectures or dars, but in gatherings that were female only or private, to the extent, this is what I've heard, maybe I'm totally wrong, that people who described the way Bibi Zainab looked were told not to do so and told off about this. So just the question is, are these two incidents true? And also, that's it. Thank you.
Nice to see. going to say everyone can hear my voice. You don't need a microphone. Thank you so much for being on the panel. Hopefully we can get 3 women next time. As a side note, it's always worth collecting a speaker bureau list of lots of women. I think lots of other wider women's groups have done the same thing. I just wanted to make some observations to add to the discussion, and if you want to add some reflections, thinking about representation and what it means to be a good Muslim woman. And as you said, we're sort of preaching to the choir here, but to sometimes state what's really important is societies, including Muslim societies, often talk about women as role models for women. And I think this is a huge category error. We really need to start thinking about female role models as role models for everybody who happen to be women. And this is a really crucial distinction, because often we think about Lady Maryam, Lady Zaynab, Lady Fatima, Lady Khadija as something that only women can learn from. And the huge deficit I see in society is that we don't have those feminine attributes, how to be a human being, that, with respect to my brothers, that men can also learn from. So I think we have to create that category shift, and it's absolutely essential we do that. But then thinking about what does it mean to be a good Muslim woman and having representation? And it was, really interesting to hear you talking about, bringing up girls. So I've written a book for girls about image and what that means. Is that as part of my work on Muslim social trends, I kind of often dip into asking Muslim women, which female Muslim influencers do you follow on social media? And it breaks my heart that the list of them are all fashion bloggers. There's nothing wrong with being a Muslim fashion blogger. It's if that's your thing. But those are the only Muslim women we have at a level which people follow. So where are these Muslim women who are exhibiting the talents that we see of Lady Zaynab and the other women? And the thing is, all of us, men and women, only get those influencers because we follow them. So every follow and every click is really, really important. But we just don't have those women. And just a final observation, you were talking about, which is related to this kind of good Muslim women. You were talking about how girls often change their behavior in that year 5, year 6 period. And studies broadly of girls, and you will know this better than me, show that between the age of 7 and 11, girls generally think that their appearance is their most important attribute. And our young Muslim girls are not immune for that. And we have to be really mindful that while talking about hijab, for example, is important, it is not the only marker of what it means to be a good Muslim woman, because we are then reinforcing societal expectations for girls and women that it's only about how you look and the clothes you wear, about how we judge you as a good woman. So I just wanted to throw those observations in.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to very quickly give my views on all of them really quickly. Increasing confidence to women, girls, and public speaking, etc. I mean, obviously, the biggest way to do that is to role model it and to model it yourself. Stepping out of your comfort zone to be able to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable for you. Women, every human being has a capacity to be able to disseminate knowledge or wisdom to others. Everyone has some capacity to, whether it's through writing, like Sister Shalina, or whether it's through art, whatever. There's always some way, but a lot of women hold back. They have their children, and it's a huge, massive responsibility, but they hold themselves back. And I find you say to mothers, you say, try this, you'll be really good at this. You might observe, actually, they'll be quite good at this aspect, but they just hold back. The best way you can teach your children is by modeling the fact that you can go out slightly outside your discomfort zone to do that thing. And so that is the most powerful way, I think, that girls can learn confidence. And obviously, making more of a community like this where they see more female role models. Obviously, in answer to the brother, I don't know the authenticity of some of these things. We know that a lot of the narrative of Karbala is not fully authenticated. Unfortunately, I don't know that. I have not researched. I would not be able to say. of course, Lady Zaynab gave talks in predominantly female gatherings. Of course, she was barely seen in public. You know, we're talking about a completely different era of time. And I've heard this used a lot by females of my generation to discourage other women from public speaking, because they're saying that, you know what, she only did it in necessity. But I disagree, because, like I said, she didn't have to. Imam Zayn al-Abidin spoke. She didn't have to. She didn't have to speak. And that was if we're talking about difference generation from me to my daughter, we're talking about a different world. So I think these kind of comparisons, I think they do a disservice to Sayyidah Zaynab, because she was so revolutionary for her time, that we are comparing now to then and saying, well, no, women should be not seen and behind female gatherings. I think it's just a false analogy in my view. Finally, just really quickly, I completely agree with everything Sister Shalina said. There's not really much to add. The number one vulnerability for girls is their appearance. The number one shame factor is their appearance. For females, that's known. For men, it's their strength and their, you know. For women, it's their appearance. That's the number one factor. And so when people are predominantly following this, it's because we put so much emphasis on this. And you're right that even Islamically, sometimes we've overemphasized this to the point where we've driven people away from the hijab by overemphasizing the little bits and pieces of, like, no, this is a good Muslim woman, and that's, you know, the archetype of what it means to be good. And it also comes to voice, and it also comes, you know, she's louder, therefore she's a bit like, you know, not, she's a bit like, I don't know what you say in Urdu, whatever, Gujarati, but, you know, she's like, we say wakha, you know, she's a bit wakha, she's a bit naughty if she's like a bit loud. And she's hababa because she's quiet, you know. It's perpetuating this image of what it means to be good, and really sort of making girls feel like they can never be a good enough Muslim because they don't have XYZ, you know, attributes. So a huge issue, and that's why 100% we need more representation. We need more women out there attracting other women through through what they say, rather than how they appear and how they look, and, you know, and that's all good and fine. And they've, you know, alhamdulillah, they've made hijab maybe more mainstream. It's a good thing in a way, but again, it's sort of, it kind of defeats the purpose of why hijab's there in the first place.
Absolutely. Just to quickly touch on the 3 points, the sister that said about daughters and raising daughters, I think that the foundation really starts from home, and we see that many times that especially girls, especially young girls, their lack of confidence, their lack of self-esteem within themselves really does stem from home. For example, if their father is missing, is absent from the upbringing of the daughter. So I think even the hadith talk about the love that we need to give our daughters to really raise that confidence, to give them the confidence and the strength and the courage to go forward. So I really believe it starts from home, and we need to really bring up our daughters to be strong individuals while knowing the religion and while having that confidence. To the brother that asked the question, with Sayyidah Zaynab, I've heard this several times, that people say it was a one-off situation where she went out and delivered, and many times we see that, you know, the participation of females in early Islam was immense. I mean, we have narrations that said that women used to go to the Prophet and the Imam and ask them questions. So women were present, whether or not they were fully veiled, that's a discussion within itself. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, when she delivered that speech, Imam Ali could have delivered that speech for her. And when we read the narration, it says she took a group of women with her and went to the masjid of the Prophet to deliver that speech. Sayyidah Zaynab was present. So we do see, even in narrations, many of the narrators say, I heard Fatima Zahra say so and so, I heard Fatima Zahra. So they were present. The Prophet took Fatima Zahra alayhi salam to the event of Mubahala. So they were present. So, and I think when it comes to female participation now and whether we need to speak or give a lecture, for me, I always revert back to the Maraja and what they say, and whether, you know, the limitations they put on women, whether a woman, what she should or not, or what goes beyond the rulings of religion. I think we should always revert back to what the Maraja say, because they do know greater than us in terms of what is religiously acceptable. And just lastly, to mashallah, you've done excellent work as well in our community, and you made a valid point. I think there is so much emphasis on physical appearance when it comes to women, and unfortunately this is not just with Muslim women, but I think women in general. Women are over-sexualized. There's so much concentration on females and the way they look, and even influencers on social media and YouTube. Even when we look beyond the Muslim community, the most followed individuals in the YouTube community are women who are makeup, you know, gurus, they call them. I don't know what they call them, fashionistas. But these people are individuals that are followed the most. When someone has an Instagram page or YouTube page which talks about knowledge or talks about important topics, you know, it doesn't bring as much views as the individuals that talk about appearance, how to make yourself more attractive, let's say. And I think this is what Islam comes as a strong force. It tries to go beyond that and says, you know, look at what the woman is saying, look at her intellect rather than the way she looks. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're trying to break through, where society puts so much emphasis on the way a woman looks. And unfortunately, our daughters, statistics have showed that the level of anxiety and the level of depression that young girls are being admitted for is much higher now than it was before. And I think the more that we focus on physical appearance of women, the more this will have a negative effect on young girls. So I think it's up to the community to really come forward and to really kind of make content engaging for young women about matters that matter the most, and try to, inshallah, bring in that audience, inshallah.
Can I just add that I actually said to Maryam Asaria, who contacted me, like, you should have a male on the panel, because Fatima Zahra is Lady Zaynab, Fatima Zahra, they're all role models for both, and this is the problem we have. We just kind of, like you say, and this is a problem we have as speakers. You know, once I gave a talk, and my husband was there, and he noticed that as soon as I started speaking, the males that were next to him just started chatting to each other. Males generally are not very good at listening to females. We know that from everyday life. No, I'm joking. But yes, although I think multitasking is a myth anyway. But I think that the point is that they're so not used to us speaking that I think they probably switch off. I think the whole male attitude needs to change, and they need to equally learn from these women as much as we learn from them, 100%.
Are we out of time, or do we? Okay.
So, I have a question/comment. You know, I sometimes think this lack of confidence and this lack of representation is because of a lack of value of the role that women have played. Kawther, you briefly mentioned feminism featuring a lot. And feminism has been beautiful that it has allowed women access to spaces that they haven't had before. And it has also allowed that voice to be heard. But I also think that feminism, the biggest weakness is that it has been unable to acknowledge the caregiving role that we have played for millennia. And that caregiving role, whether it's played by women or men, is equally valuable. And I feel that if we as a society, as a community, started acknowledging that how can a community survive without its caregivers, I think we would have confidence to bring about that representation, that our voices are not heard on the table, like you mentioned, within our religious circles and sometimes in the professional circles as well. But it is this lack of value of the role that we play, and whether that role is played by us as women or as men, it is equally valuable. But there is that lack of confidence in us as a community and as a society about the role that caregivers play and the importance of them within our society.
Yeah, 100%. I think in general our value has shifted to very much our profession, whether you're a man or a woman. What do you do? What are you? I'm a doctor, you know, whatever. You know, we define ourselves by our professions. And while I think we've made such great strides and really like I can't say enough how proud I am of my Muslim sisters or non-Muslim sisters for the strides they've made in society, making their voices heard. At the same time, I think we've gone too much maybe away from our, like, and that's why I think our primary role as mums is undervalued, underestimated, devalued, so that you get a lot of, you know, women that don't work feeling like they are not valuable in society, that they're not worth it enough, you know, and it can work both ways. So I think as someone who's worked full-time with children, who's been through that whole cycle, you know, I've come to, after many years of trial and error, to the realization that we've shifted far too much that way, and we cannot be everything for everyone, and that something has to give if we give all our hearts and souls into our careers. And so I 100% agree, yeah. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And actually, and there's some value to the fact that maybe, you know, myself and Zahra might have worked in society. A lot of the women who are Islamic scholars, men and women, may have never even worked, you know, or still working. And there's some value to the insight that that gives you. So I don't ever belittle what I do as a profession, because that makes me who I am and gives me the insight that I give. And actually it means that I can, like you say, articulate that point of view from a lived experience, which is much more powerful.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. I think that's all we have time for.
I think there's one.
I think if you find Zahra and
Let's just ask. Yeah, just one more question. Go on. Yeah. So the other way. We'll be very brief.
Can you hear me? Okay. Assalamu alaikum to you both, and thank you so much for putting yourself out there and representing women. This is a really, really quick question, but I feel like there's been generally a drop in, like, amongst the younger generation, both boys and girls, in coming out to go to actual religious gatherings. But there hasn't been a loss of interest in religion. People are seeking knowledge online. People are listening to speakers on podcasts. So I feel like, especially for people like, I mean, personally, I don't see a problem with this. I'm always rushed off my feet. I don't have time. I literally am working like so many jobs. So I feel like, do you feel like it's important to encourage the actual art form of public speaking? Because I feel like people have lost interest in that. Is there like an Islamic tradition, or is there kind of sources and scholarship to kind of that would back that up, and the importance of public speaking generally?
Yeah, I think, like you said, there has been a disinterest in attending mosque, and in one hand, it's a positive that we have all these other means of gaining the knowledge, whether it's, we saw the benefits of that during the pandemic. And I remember during the nights of Ramadan, there was a sister that her child had chickenpox, and she's like, I can't attend a mosque. So I think there's many positives in the different means of gaining knowledge. But I do always say that we need to encourage individuals to actually attend a mosque, because narrations talk about the blessings and the benefits of actually attending. And not even that, I think, you know, I think now the more that, going back to technology, the more that technology had advanced, I think we have become an antisocial society, whereby we would rather not meet people face to face. But, you know, when it says the art of public speaking, I mean, Islamic speeches has been throughout Islamic history. You know, we always, the prophets and the imams, I think the way of really delivering a message, public speeches, lectures, the art of, you know, delivering a lecture is a skill that we all really need and is encouraged. So I actually suggested to one of the mosques to hold classes where we can really talk to people about how to structure a lecture, how to deliver a lecture, how to gain confidence, because I believe these are qualities that everyone needs, whether they want to become a lecturer or not. I think, you know, the art of speaking is a very, very important skill that we do really need, and will help us in many areas. So number one, I would obviously encourage people that rather than listening podcasts, it can be good in many other situations. I'm a mother with 3 children as well. I completely get it. Sometimes we're juggling from one thing to another. Listening to a lecture online can be more practical for us, but attending the mosque has a blessing and benefits beyond. And I really believe that anyone that works within mosques to really encourage holding workshops about the art of speaking, and to even gain that confidence, whether people want to become speakers or not, it is a very, very important skill that we need to really master. So I completely agree with your comments, yeah.
Agree, just to add that I think we can change the way we deliver them. I think that, you know, the model of how we deliver them with 45-minute lectures on the minbar, same style, same kind of, you know, it's not so relevant. I don't think it's as eye-catching. Our attention span's definitely gone down as a humanity in general. So that's why, you know, people swipe through videos, and if they're 3 minutes long, they're far too long to listen to the end. So we need to engage. If a lot of young people feel that the mosque is not for them and they'd rather listen on the go, I think there is a huge benefit in getting people face to face. The thing that the pandemic showed us is that technology is great, but it's no substitution for real listening to someone. And I even feel that when I give a talk. When I give a talk and really interact with my audience, it's a hugely different thing from when I listen to myself recorded or watch it, which I never do. It's just different. There's a different flavor to it. But I think we can change the way we do it. I think more workshop styles, more interactive kind of panels, having more diversity of speakers, something that Mahfal I know is trying to do anyway, will maybe encourage more people to attend face to face, because there is, I 100% believe there's a value in that.
Thank you so much. I think that's all we have time for, but Sahar and Kawther will be around, I think, a bit. So if you have any more questions, please do come up to them. But yes, thank you so much for such an amazing discussion.
Thank you so much for having us. Salawat.
Sorry, just a couple of quick announcements to finish. Next week we have Sister Bilkisu Savage, who will be speaking to us as the chair of the Muslim Council of Britain's Proudly Muslim and Black Committee about Proudly Muslim and Black Insights and Recommendations. The week after we have Sharmin Ziauddin. She's the editor-in-chief of She Speaks, We Hear, speaking about podcasting and amplifying women's voices. And the week after we have Faduma Hassan, who will be speaking to us about her time in the leader of the opposition's office and her experience in Keir Starmer's office and before. Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Sisters and brothers, just to say, if your children were in the children's program, there's so many coats that people have forgotten next door. So can you just check that it's not theirs, or just go and pick the coats up before you leave, please? Thank you.